Hey y'all, I'm Jeff Elkins. I'm from DialogueDoctor.com. And when I found out I was going to be on the self-publishing show with James and Mark, I was super excited because I'm a huge fan of the show. I've been listening to it for years and they've given me so much advice and helped me in my indie author career. And so I thought I want to do something really special for their listeners. I want to create something just for them. And the thing that I feel like I've done that's helped authors the most is a teaching on characterization. So what I'm going to share with you today is what I affectionately call the dialogue daisy. So the dialogue daisy, excuse me while I share my screen. There we go. I can't do two things at once. There we go. The dialogue daisy is a way to understand character voice. Now, if I were to ask you, when I talk to most authors and I ask them what's their character voice, a lot of times I get answers like, oh, my character is an orphan and the parents died and now they live on a spaceship and they travel the universe. And I have to stop them and be like, okay, that's fantastic. I'm really excited that that's where we're starting, but that's not your character voice. Or sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, my character's really shy and they don't like people and they're kind of a lone wolf. And again, I'll have to say like, okay, that's not your character's voice. That's your character's personality. And what I found as I was working with other authors and helping them understand how to write dialogue, that they don't understand their character voice. But here's why understanding character voice is important. Because if we have a consistent and strong character voice, we will engage the reader. Dialogue engages the reader. And if the reader is inspired and connected to how our character sounds, our character's voice, then the reader's going to read to the end of our book and go on to the next book because the reader connects to the character through the voice. So what we want is consistent and engaging character voices and a variety of character voices in our cast. Right? So we want a cast full of different character voices. So if you think of each character as a flower, and you think of, for your cast, you're going to plant this garden of flowers, right? What we want is a wide variety of flowers in the garden so that the reader has multiple places to connect and enjoys engaging with all of your characters. So the root of understanding that is understanding what a character voice is. So that's what we're going to do right now. In the next 10 minutes, depending on how fast I can talk, we're going to go through what a character voice is. So this is my Daisy. This is the character we're talking about. Imagine a protagonist from something you're writing or editing and picture them as this Daisy. The first thing we need to talk about are the roots of the Daisy. What's building up the character voice? So what's building up the character voice is the background. And that's what I said before, that most authors confuse their character voice with their character background. Your character background is really the roots and what feeds your character voice. So the character background consists of your character's genetics. That means their relationship to their family, birth order, any kind of thing you want to go into there. And their appearance, whether they're tall or short, redheaded or brown-headed, all that kind of stuff. Also includes the character's backstory. Those are moments of triumph and moments of defeat that have happened in their life. And it also includes the character's place in culture. So that means their gender, and that means their nationality, and that means their ethnicity or their race, right? And all of these things are, when we're talking about your character's background, it's not just that these things exist, but it's how society responds to those things. So let's say with genetics that your character is tall, right? How does society respond to your character being tall? The society of your world, not the society of your reader, right? How does your world that you've created respond to your character being tall? Or let's say that your character is a goblin, right? That's your character's race. If we're writing fantasy, your character's a goblin. How does the world respond to your character being a goblin? That's your character's backstory, right? It's this conversation between your character and who your character is and the things that have happened in your character's life and how society responds to that. Because how society responds to that and who the character is in life builds the second part of our Daisy, which is the stem. And the stem is your character's personality. Now, this is the second thing when I ask you what your character's voice is. A lot of times we'll answer with personality. Personality is the way that our character behaves and acts in the world around them, right? And it's informed by their background. So remember I said that the character background is this combination between the things that make up your character's story, their backstory, their place in culture, their genetics, and society of your book, the society's take on those things, right? Develop into how your character operates in the world or your character's personality. So if your character has a very tragic backstory and it's been very hard, your character might retreat into their shell and be shy. We'd say your character has a shy personality. Or if your character is a fighter and the world's been difficult on them, they may come out a warrior, like they're going to go at it and they're going to fight. Right. So the character's personality, for me, when we're talking about building characters that engage, building character voices that engage, that character's personality is really about how the character, in response from pressures of society or acceptance from society, how the character has formed their presentation to the world. Right. This is still not your character voice, though, because the character personality just holds up the character voice. Your character voice is the actual flower. Right? That's your character voice. So think about when you look at a flower. When you look at a flower, do you look at the stem and go like, oh my gosh, that flower has the most beautiful stem? You don't. You look at a flower and you look at the bud, right? And that's what readers connect with your character. They connect with the character voice, the bud, because the character voice are the words that they're taking on the page and putting into their own mind and translating into a voice in their mind and then coming back out as they read more on the page, right? Like it's that connection, that imagination of the character voice that actually builds the character in their mind, right? So, and the character voice is how we show things in the text too, right? Like the character voice is how we show when someone's sad or when someone's happy or when someone's excited. Their character voice modulates, which we'll get to in a minute. But the character voice is the bud. And what we want to do when we're creating a character voice is we want to take your character's personality, right? Let's say shy. And then we want to ask another question, which is how does that sound? Now, when you're writing, this is likely what you're doing in your mind anyway. When you're like, okay, this character is shy, and then you go to write, what's the step you're skipping that you're doing inherently is, what does a shy person sound like? And that's the step we want to be intentional about, right? Because that's the actual forming of the character voice. So we want to say, okay, this character's shy. What does that sound like? Well, it means they only use a few words at a time. It means that they're hesitant to talk. It means maybe one sentence or two, but no long paragraphs for this character because they're shy. So they're not going to give you a ton of words. Zero exclamation points. No. Zero questions, because questions engage you with other people. A shy character isn't going to ask questions, right? So if we can start to take the tools that we have as writers, the words we use, the size of our sentences, the number of sentences, the punctuation that we have, if we can start taking those tools that we use as writers and shape them into a voice, we can then create consistency through our book. By the shy person always sounds shy because we know how we're writing their voice, right? But let's go back to the other illustration of like a fighter, right? Like my character's a fighter. They never back down from a fight. They're going to jump in whenever they can. That bud is going to look very different, right? Like that character might have a lot of bold, strong words. They might make a lot of declarations. They might declare their plans all the time. They're constantly going to tell people what to do. And they're not afraid to argue. They're not afraid to ask questions, but when they ask questions in the form of forming a point. Right? Can you see how the two characters sound different? And if I were to put those two characters in a cast and have them talk to each other, now we have a really vibrant conversation where things are moving and things are going, and it engages the reader because I've got two characters that sound very different, two very different flowers for the reader to look at. Let's take it one step further. Right? Because what our readers really want from our books, whether we're writing romance or we're writing fantasy or we're writing thrillers, what they want is an emotional journey. Your readers want to feel something, right? So we modulate the voice. In order to get our readers to feel something, because our readers are connecting to our work through character voice, in order for our readers to feel, or connecting to our work through dialogue, which is character voices interacting with each other, in order for our readers to feel something, we got to modulate those character voices. Think about your day and all the places you've been today. Let's say that you went to a coffee shop. Now that some restrictions for COVID are dropping in some places, you went to a coffee shop and you got yourself a coffee, and then you came home and you talked to your romantic partner, and then you called your mom. Right. My bet is you sounded different in all three of those. That when you talked to the barista, you sounded different than when you talked to your romantic partner. And when you talked to your romantic partner, you sounded different than when you talked to your mom. Now, your personality is all the same. You are who you are. But in those three instances, your voice modulates. The words you use change just a little bit. And what's happening is you have this base voice that is an expression of your personality. And then aspects of that voice are expressed and suppressed depending on who you're talking to, the circumstances you're in, the role you're playing, or the emotions you feel. If we as writers can master the modulation of character voice, then we can take our readers on an intentional journey, an emotional journey that will wrap them into our book, get them reading to the end and moving on to the next page. So that's our character voice Daisy, our dialogue Daisy. When we're writing dialogue and we're thinking about character voice, we want to think about the character's background. How does that background develop into a personality? How is that personality expressed through a voice? And then how are we modulating that voice depending on the circumstances our character's in order to take our reader on an emotional journey that will keep them reading to the very end of the book. I hope this was helpful. If you want to know more, come back around dialoguedoctor.com. And I just want to say thanks again to James and Mark for giving me space in the show. They're both fantastic, and I really appreciate their work. All right. I hope to see you around.